profitable to think about why that isn't the case now.
I mean, I tend to think it's economic reasons.
Yeah. Well, and this might come back, one of the things that pops into my head first is the idea that I was talking about with the creating the availability for the creativity, which obviously is economically related, but it's like the idea that don't go touch this thing because it's working pretty well right now. Like we don't have the resources to make that thing better or to scrap it and do something completely different. We've already used the resources necessary for that, so work on something else.
Well, what's something that you would say fits that description?
Oh, I mean, well, I think that's one of the problems that we have a lot with different sources of energy. There's or we can talk about a new renewable types of energy, or you can talk about just infrastructure in general. The other day I was thinking about how it would
I'm kind of confused. So it sounded like you were saying there are certain things we shouldn't teach people because they're working well already.
No. I was saying that's, I think, how we do it now.
Not
because it's a good way of doing things.
Agreed.
Because if that's true, then probably someone would just need to learn more about that system, and then they would learn that their idea had already been done.
That's definitely a problem right now, is the idea, there's the pervasive ideology of kind of everything's amazing, don't question it, don't try to change things. Yeah, it's weird seeing how I thought about society as a kid, and just kind of the messages you received about how everything's been figured out and it's just getting better and better and better, and we're the good guys, and we beat the bad guys, and now things are great. And
I feel like that's pretty typical for kids to think, though. They think that they start off thinking that no one knows anything, and then you ask your parents questions and you find out they know everything.
Yeah.
And then, everything's great. And then as you get older, you're starting to, rip away the veils of those things.
I just feel like we have a lot more veils still in place than we should.
Right.
Adults have a lot of veils still in this society too.
And I think that comes back to how we're taught about things, right? So one of the things I wanted to say about just the way that education is structured and why I think that we don't do the more philosophical Greek style is that I think it's harder, right? I think it's much harder to do that. It's harder for the teacher. It's harder to know what you have at the end. It's hard to make a standardized test for that kind of stuff. Right. And so I really think it comes down to how easy it is to set up an education system and then how easy it is to evaluate what you have. Right. And so what we've seemed to have gravitated towards is throwing information at people and seeing what sticks. Yep. And then based on what sticks, we can evaluate how well, that person is doing / the education system as a whole is doing. And so what that does from the other perspective, though, is you become a wall that's having a bunch of spaghetti thrown at you, right? And how much sticks is relative to what makes sense to you. And so you're not in the position of critically thinking about any of those things.
No.
In school, at least, it's not telling you to, right? Unless you do it yourself. And so what that tells you, if you're to take that at face value, is that they know everything. You're here to learn what everything is. Yeah. And so then you end up in this position of, okay, just tell me what it is. We already know, right? That's what I'm here for. Just tell me the information.
Yeah, which kills your creative interest.
Exactly.
As well.
Exactly. And that's not how people learn very well. It's not really interesting.
It's really frustrating. The class I'm finishing up right now is on testing in education. Yeah. And it's just been so frustrating in that class, man. And for one of the papers I did, I was looking into Finland because they have the best education system in the world right now. They do one test a year.
Nice.
One. At the end. Uh-huh. And just the amount of differences they have is insane. Their teachers are paid on the same level as doctors and lawyers. They're treated with that level of esteem. Yeah. Classrooms often have more than one instructor.
Nice.
And, switch fluidly from topic to topic and just all these different things. And it's so much better. They have almost no homework.
Yeah.
And yet they get better grades. And so it just kind of flies in the face of this whole idea of, well, you have to keep throwing the shit at them or you won't find out how well they're doing.
Yeah.
But then it's if that thing is making them do worse, then what are we doing here?
Right. Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is really malignant about the way that we teach people is that it teaches us to not like the fact that we don't critically think about things, which is what we're taught to do, then teaches us not to critically think about what we're doing and try to update and make it better. And so even though we have a bunch of evidence, we're not able to, or as a society at least, we're not able to be like, look at all this stuff that tells us what we're doing is wrong and tells us that we should move this way. Right, that's that's a thought pattern that you learn if you do like science, basically, or philosophy. Like those are kind of fundamental thought patterns that you learn. But because we don't learn that way, we're just taught like tell us what to do and then we'll do it. And so there's no like critical thinking about how to change things and how to update. And we also don't have the critical thinking skills to sort of like evaluate information and say whether or not we think it's true. And so most people rely on emotions for that, or just what they already know.
Well, and then creativity, I think, can only thrive outside of that environment where there's those high stakes. You know, where you have to perform and you have to achieve what they're telling you to achieve. Totally. I mean, I think that's getting worse and worse, especially given the economic context where, you know, students at a young age, their parents are putting all this pressure on them and saying like, your grades are going to determine whether you're poor or not. Yeah. Right now, 13-year-old, like, how does that make a good learning environment for a child?
Yeah, and plus we know that stress is bad for retaining information.
And you're you know, making them ingest and take onto themselves this kind of mentality of like, I have to bow before the man to, you know, get granted a not shitty class in society, and it's just really gross.
It is.
And the testing environment is like god awful. Just like the one I did, like 200 people in a room, and just like filling out scantrons, just dead quiet.
And it's stupid.
And you get like a break every like 3 hours.
Yeah, and it's stupid too because the fucking time limits, right? Like, why are we trying to evaluate how quickly someone can figure something out?
Right.
Is that really that important? You know,
it's
like if they can get the answer eventually and they get it right, isn't that more important than if they could get it right 15 minutes sooner than the other person, or get it wrong 15 minutes? Like, I don't know. That just seems silly.
Not if we can toss away all those other people.
Yeah. Oh, you're not fast enough for the world. Let's just.
Basically, that's what it is.
Well, that's what it's silly though, because there's so many jobs where people that can mull things over and get the right answer later are way better off than people that skip problems that they don't know the answer to and only answer things that they can answer in 2 seconds.
Yeah,
you know, that's essentially what we're
some people like. I mean, I know how I've gotten through tests a lot, especially in high school. Was I just got really good at kind of intuiting which one made the most sense. And more often than not, I was right. You know, I'd get B's and A's on my tests, and I didn't know like 2/3 of the answers. And I was like, all right, you know?
Yeah.
You know, if you somewhat pay attention and you trust your gut, you can wing a lot of those.
Totally.
Maybe that's what they're trying to teach us the whole time.
Yeah, that's frustrating though.
And the problem is, like, from an economic standpoint, our standards are, like, our test scores are going down. So we need to change, because what we're doing right now is not working.
No.
And, like, I think we're trying to get to a point where we're, like, the intellectual, like, powerhouse of the world, but we're never going to get there if we're in this, like, old traditional education system.
For sure. Yeah, and the whole thing that you mentioned about how Finland pays their teachers way more, that's so
smart. And it's hard to become a teacher. Smart. You've got to know your shit.
It really should
Exactly.
be. Right now, it's almost like a backup career for people that don't know what they want to do. And they're like, I guess I'll just be a teacher.
Yep.
And then it's like, that's who's shaping the future.
Yeah. And then the ones that are serious about it are under so much economic pressure because of how little you get paid and, you know...
Yeah,
all the shitty environment and infrastructure for it.
The people that are like really, really smart can do other things that will get them way more money and will still be fulfilling and will still, you know, contribute to society. But they might have been a teacher otherwise, you know?
Yeah, it's weird to think we have a society where like our best and brightest are figuring out how to move money around on Wall Street. You know, like what's
how to manipulate money to make more of it, but you don't actually have more. You just...
Yeah.
Jesus. Anyway.
So we took a little bit of break. little bit of a break for some white noise that we had to cut out. So now we're gonna kind of rehash some things so it'll sound dumb or than normal. But anyway,
sorry, it's already dumb. So.
Right? It's already fucking dumb.
Self-loathing is good for the soul.
Yeah,
I tell you,
keeps me in check. You know?
That's how I improve my life.
It's how I stop being a perfectionist.
There you go.
Just up front admit defeat. Just kidding.
Perfect.
Anyway, there is an aspect of truth to that though, which is like if you're a perfectionist, if you just admit your flaws up front, then you're not intimidated by your need to be perfect at things.
Totally.
But anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, so the whole thing that, like we move money around and make more money by doing that, that sounds a lot like rent seeking, which is a term, I had to look it up. It comes from economics, but also public choice theory. But yeah, it's basically just trying to get something without really producing anything.
Yeah, so this reminds me a lot of some interviews I saw with Michael Hudson, who's a famous economist because he was one of the few who predicted the 2008 crash. And he's also a historian, and he was talking about how in classical economics, it was considered that like the landlord classes were not considered part of the productive economy. It's something extracting money from the economy. And he was talking about how it's really like backwards and twisted now because we count that kind of income as part of our GDP as if it's part of our domestic product when you're just... So because someone owns a piece of property, they're able to extract money from people who require those things to survive.
Totally.
So, I mean, it's more of like a leech function than a productive function.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if that's where the term rent seeking comes from.
Maybe. I don't know.
But yeah, the GDP is a pretty bad measure of the economy.
Yeah.
It's not very efficient or indicative.
This would be all we talk about politically, though.
I know.
Well, yeah, I mean...
GDP and unemployment. And unemployment, again, has a lot of flaws with it.
Huge flaws, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if we could figure out a good, more scientifically standard way of evaluating the systems of a country, other than just those, that would be great.
Well, it's just so difficult because the way you evaluate systems is so wrapped up into the theater of politics.
Yeah.
I think there are better ones that economists use. I don't know what they are, but I'm pretty sure that they have other ones that they prefer to use, but we just don't talk about them because
politics.
Yeah, politics. And also, there's a lot of what's the word? There's a lot of power in the incumbency of terms already. So people know what GDP is, and so they're familiar with it. You don't have to explain it. But if we were like, we're going to start using this new term, people would be like, what the fuck is that? Well,
I think the way the economic field itself and the language it uses is intentionally very difficult to understand.
I really liked when we thought like the Earth was like the center of the solar system and the universe. So like, I don't know, like updating it to be like heliocentric that's like a lot.
Really
you know what I mean?
Pretty lame.
Sounds like an existential trip.
That sounds like we're gonna have to change a lot of things. So let's just keep it.
Get a new watch.
Exactly. Yes. And what use really could it be anyways? What would we learn? From changing to something that's more realistic.
Are you trying to make a point here, Drew?
Oh yeah, I don't. No, I mean that's why we should keep it the same.
Okay.
And
glad we're on the same page.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. Well, there's education. So, what's some other stuff we're going to talk about? What's interesting to you guys right now among our topics?